Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be doing some more predictions for 6th Invitational 2025 for Rainbow Six Siege. So we've already seen the groups, we already saw the initial rounds of bracket, which we did not predict. We already saw the initial top 8 matchups, and now we have top 6 matchups to predict as well. So we're going to talk about 3 predictions. Before we get to that, we'll do a little bit of recap. I didn't really do that in the last video. I was trying to be pretty quick. Ended up being still like 7 minutes, but fairly quick, maybe by my standard. And then there will be, I suppose, also some subsequent videos. Those will probably be pretty quick as well. I think we'll just have to predict after today the semifinals, finals, and grand final. And do keep in mind, you have a little bit of time to get things in. You have well over a day to get your next predictions in. The last one had a really quick turnaround because games ended at, I don't know, 10 o'clock Eastern or something one night, and you had to have predictions in by the next day at noon. So you had like a little more than a 12-hour window, but still, most of that, I assume, for a lot of people, it was time that you were asleep. So, okay, let's go back and talk about groups really quick, and then we'll talk about what happened in the most recent predictions, and then we'll officially make predictions. So, in group stage, did pretty poorly, but I think most people probably did pretty poorly. If you got like 5, 6, maybe 7 points, I wouldn't be blown away. I think that's reasonable. If you got more than 7, I don't know, you're like a prophet, or you're just really lucky. Liquid did not get first. They got 4th place. M80 did end up in 2nd, so that's one of my 4 points of the 12 possible. Unwanted, I felt really bad about this one because I really wanted to come back in and change this to Team Joel, and I was going to change this to Shopify. This wouldn't have net me another point if I did change to Shopify, but this would have net me a point. But I felt like if I was going to change my predictions, I was sort of obligated to make a video, and I didn't really feel like making a video. So honestly, I probably should have got a 5th point for this, but I did not. So Unwanted did not end up in last. This was Team Joel, and again up here, this was G2, and that was a bit of a surprise. I thought there was a lot of volatility in the group, and G2 did exceed my expectations, but maybe not massively. I guess going completely flawless in terms of maps was pretty impressive, but I feel like they overperformed, but also Joel was worse than I thought they would be. Liquid was a lot worse than I thought they would be. M80 was about where I expected, and Unwanted was honestly probably about where I expected as well, maybe a little bit better. But again, I think because Joel underperformed and because Liquid massively underperformed, that led to the errors in my assessments of this group. In Group B, no points. I'm sure most people predicted Cyclops. It was the most obvious pick, but this was, I guess, the best Cyclops we've ever seen at an international event. Not only did they make it out of groups, but they even won a match in bracket. FaZe clan, they didn't end up on top. This ended up being Furia. FaZe was in 2nd. So if you just base your predictions on what you saw last SI, you maybe could have got this group correct. Secret, they end up as the ones eliminated over Cyclops. It was pretty close. Had they won map 2 of their series, then they would have eliminated Cyclops. They lost maps 2 and 3, but at the point that they lost map 2, it didn't matter. They were already eliminated, so map 3 was kind of whatever for them. And yeah, so Furia ending up on top, a little bit unexpected. They didn't look terrible this year, but they certainly did not look like the absolute world beaters they were last year. But at this point, I think they are probably looking like the strongest team in the tournament. They've not dropped a single map since getting 2-0'd by Cyclops in their very first round. So this ended up being, yeah, Furia here, FaZe here, and Secret here. Honestly, if you got several points in this group, I'd be pretty surprised. I'm sure very few people did. In Group C, obviously, this is where I got the most points, and 2nd place ended up being Raza. They were really, really close to being 1st place. They just lost out on tiebreak to BDS, even though they had more series wins. BDS was 2-2, whereas Raza was 3-1. Dark Zero, they were close-ish, but they don't end up at 2nd. But BDS in 1st, Talent in 5th. Regardless of how we got there, were certainly the expected results in my eyes, so I did fine on this group. And then in Group D, it was Scars going home. I'm not surprised. Some people were saying they really thought this was going to be Oxygen, but I felt pretty confident in this being Scars. And then I just got these 2 flipped, W7M and Virtus Pro, and that's well enough. Virtus Pro, they lost to W7M at the last major, being eliminated in semifinals. It was a pretty close matchup, and so if you swap these, if you thought W7M maybe wasn't going to quite do as well as they did last time, or maybe even more likely, you thought that the sort of curse that we see in Rainbow Six Siege, where a team wins an event and then they have a pretty significant fall off at the last event, if you thought that was going to happen again, then I think swapping these two would have been fine. I'm sure some people got all 3 points in Group D. I really wish Ubisoft would have made this a little bit more forgiving. Like if they just said you have to pick the top 2 teams in the group, not in order, I would have gotten another point for having FaZe in my top 2. I would have got 2 more points for having these guys in the top 2. So I think that would have been a bit nicer. They made it really hard this time around because you had to predict exact positions. In previous majors, phases 1 and 2, it was which teams do you think are going to go 2-0 or 0-2, 1-2, 2-1, whatever. And then in Swiss, it was like which team did you think are going to go 3-0, 3-1, 3-2. So there were different combinations. Here you had to be exact if you wanted to get points. Okay, moving on to playoffs. Yeah, we don't really need to talk about the first few rounds. We didn't do predictions, so the ones with the colored outlines we did. Basically, there were no upsets in this last round that we predicted. BDS did beat Space Station. I went with the upset pick for this one, but for the other ones, I went with the favorite, Furia over Raza, FaZe over Falcons, and Unwanted over Auction. Maybe this one's up for debate a little bit more, but I do think Unwanted was probably the favorite in this one to some extent. There were a lot of upsets in previous rounds. FaZe losing 2-0 to Space Station, and we'll be seeing the rematch shortly, but, you know, like Raza beating Shopify, I think, was kind of an upset. Unwanted over W7M was a pretty massive upset, and then maybe even, yeah, Falcons beating W7M. I think that was a huge upset. Obviously, they were pretty good in their group, but W7M went 0-2 in bracket. So they went from first place at the last major to only top 16 at SI. And now we have 3 matches to predict. So starting up here, upper bracket, BDS versus Furia. I don't think too many people would have been surprised before the event if they heard that it was BDS versus Furia as the last 2 teams remaining in the upper bracket. Maybe a little bit more so about Furia because, again, they've had a little bit of a fall off this year compared to previous results, but BDS has been, you know, consistently like the best team. They were in the grand finals of the last 3 international events. Furia, they still made like top 8 at 2 of those, but one of them they did not even tend, and that was the most recent one, but they are back with a vengeance here at SI. I think this is really tough to pick, and honestly, I'm going to come back to this in a second because I want to actually predict these first. Space Station versus FaZe. Once again, Space Station some amount the underdog, although they did just beat FaZe last time. As I've said many times, when sort of top tier teams play, there is a little bit of a tendency for one to win one and then the very next one to go the other way. I think FaZe is, again, more likely to win this one. I think they have kind of more of a chip on their shoulder because last year they made it all the way to the grand final and then they mega choked in the last map. Space Station, this is their best showing at a 6 Invitational since I think 2020 where they won, and honestly might be their best international showing. Yeah, like this is probably better than any major performance they've had because I don't think they've made a major, maybe I'm forgetting one, but I don't think they've made a major top 4 since, you know, winning SI in 2020. They've made several major top 8s, but they pretty much always lose in the quarterfinals, and this is a top 6 placement. So yeah, this might be Space Station's best international showing in quite a long time. FaZe, they've done better than this. I'm going to vote for Space Station. I would probably say, if you want to go with the more likely result, I would probably vote for FaZe, but I'm going with the North American pick, the team that I want to be rooting for. Again, you can copy me if you want, or you can go with the team that I think is a little bit more likely in FaZe. And pretty similar case down here. Raza, they made a deeper run in the upper bracket than Unwanted did. Unwanted got knocked down a little bit early, but they knocked down W7M, who then got eliminated. They had a really close showing against BDS, whereas Raza Company, they've had to fight. They've fought tooth and nail. I mean, they beat Shopify, who then got immediately eliminated. So same sort of case as what we saw from Unwanted, but theirs was a 2-0, and W7M are the reigning major champions, whereas Shopify, they made it to, top 8 in Montreal, which is fine. So very similar results from the 2 teams in the first round of the upper bracket here, and then Raza beat Virtus Pro in a really close series. Unwanted lost to BDS in a really close series. I think you'd certainly say BDS the better team over Virtus Pro, especially considering who's still in the tournament in the upper bracket and who's been eliminated. Virtus Pro went down here to lose a pretty close bout to FaZe, so no shame there getting eliminated by FaZe. And Unwanted, they beat Cyclops, so maybe not the most impressive team in the world to beat, but this is probably the most impressive Cyclops we've ever seen. Unwanted also, they handled Auction pretty handily. I mean, it was a pretty clean 2-0. Gavin went like 3.0 KD nuke on those guys. I'm going to say Unwanted. I've been underrating Raza quite a lot. I finally got something right regarding them with Furia beating them, but this could certainly go either way. I don't know that I'd say picking either of these feels more correct like I would for FaZe over Space Station, but I'm going to go with both the NA teams. If you want to differentiate, feel free to do so. And then finally, BDS versus Furia, coming back to it. I really don't know because BDS, they made it to every grand final this year, so here is one more. This is, I can't remember if they made top 3 or top 4 at SI 2020. If it was top 4, then this is BDS's best showing at an SI ever. Furia, if they make it to the grand final, this will be 3 consecutive grand finals for Herds and JV92 and KZ. The other 2 guys weren't there for the first SI, but they were W7M for the last two, but this would be their third for at least the core making the grand final. They got second, they got first, and then, well, who knows what will happen if they make it here again. I really don't know. Honestly, I'm like going back and forth in my head. Furia have been so dominant, only taking that one questionable loss to CAG, but that was their very first match, and they've not dropped a map since. They've just looked crazy. BDS, a lot more mortal. They went 2-2 in groups. They had a close one against Unwanted. They did crush Space Station in map 3, but they had to go map 3. They lost map 1, close map 2. I mean, I don't know. I guess I was going to say BDS. I don't know. I'm just going to click on Furia. Honestly, I might go back in and change this before this actually happens. But for now, I'm going to say Furia. They've just been so dominant. And I mean, I guess SI is where these guys really, really shine. Okay, those are going to be my predictions for this round. Again, probably a quick follow-up video for semis and the final and the grand final when those do come around. Okay, that's going to do it for me. I will catch you guys next time.